Hello and welcome back into Yepso's universe. Today we're going to talk about the consultative bodies of the European Union. Beyond the general context I'm going to give you about these bodies, we will focus on the European Economic and Social Committee. If you have already explored Yepso's universe, the consultative bodies will probably sound you a bit familiar. However, if this is your first time landing in our universe and you are not yet very familiar with the European Union, it is possible that you don't really have them on your radar. But don't worry, that's why we are here today. My name is Carlos Gil. I am the training director at Yepso and a researcher in European affairs affiliated with the University of Alcalá. Although both my research activity and my work at Yepso focus on European civil service and its selection processes, I currently have several lines of research open. The main one focuses on investigating talent acquisition within the European External Action Service in order to strengthen the diplomatic role of the European Union in the international arena. If you are interested in the work I do not hesitate to get in touch with me via LinkedIn, and if you're interested in preparing to obtain a permanent official position in the European Union, or a cast, or a temporary agent position, or whatever, etc., beyond following me, you should also follow Yepso, the academy through which we help people like you to prepare and develop their professional career in the European Union. This week, finally, as you can see, I'm able to record from the office, and as you can see, I'm back in my usual outfit. But this changes absolutely nothing. Regardless of where I speak to you from, I will bring, as I always do, my best, let's say, enthusiasm, rigor, and also eagerness to help you when talking about these topics. In today's session, I want to focus on three specific points. First, we will review what the consultative bodies of the European Union are and which one exist. From there, we will focus on the European Economic and Social Committee, where we will first see what it is and how it is organized. And we will finish this session by analyzing the mandate of this committee. If you already have seen the previous Yepso's Universe videos, where I briefly referred to the consultative bodies, you already have a first overview, a first panoramic view of what they are and what they do. You will therefore already know that despite their prominent position, they are not, and I repeat again, they are not institutions of the European Union. If you haven't watched the videos, well, what can I say? You really should. Indeed, I will leave it here for you, and also in the description, the video about the consultative bodies. Why are we coming back to them today again? Although I already referred to them, each of them deserves an exclusive session. They are exactly the kind of bodies that are important and which, as a consequence, of course, can easily appear in a test on new knowledge. However, many people make the mistake of leaving them slightly aside despite their importance. Now, let's take a look at them. Where do the consultative bodies appear? In the European Union, we find the two consultative bodies in the Treaty on European Union, more specifically in Article 13, paragraph 4. It tells us specifically that the European Parliament, the Council and the Commission shall be assisted by an Economic and Social Committee and a Committee of the Regions acting in an advisory capacity. Therefore, the conclusion, you will agree with me, is quite straightforward. Within the category of consultative bodies, we only have two, the Economic and Social Committee and the Committee of the Regions. Now then, what does each of them do? Well, I will explain this to you in detail, both in this session and in the next one, since their functions are quite important. More specifically, in this session, like I told you, we are going to focus on the first one referred to in the Treaty on European Union. We are going to refer specifically to the European Economic and Social Committee. I have chosen to cover the content on the consultative bodies in two sessions so that the video is not excessively long. As I have already mentioned in the previous sessions, we are in a testing phase, in a pilot, and any feedback you can give us is more than welcome. So please, share your thoughts with us by writing in the comments whether you prefer longer videos like the previous one or shorter like this one. Now, let's start with the European Economic and Social Committee. One interesting fact about this body is that it is one of the oldest in the European Union. It was created by the Treaty of Rome in 1957 and has been operating since it entered into force in 1958. It was created with the aim of giving a voice to economic and social sectors in the process of European integration. And indeed, it continues to perform very similar functions since it serves as a bridge between EU institutions and the civil society. Why do I say very similar and not exactly the same? Well, in its early decades, before the creation of other consultative channels, the European Economic and Social Committee, the EESC, played a broader role as a forum for civil society. But with the establishment of the Committee of the Regions in 1992, and when it actually started working in 1994, its scope, the scope of the European Economic and Social Committee, became more clearly defined, focusing on socioeconomic representation, while the Committee of the Regions took on the representation of regional and local authorities. This is quite a big difference that you need to know. In any case, what you must be very clear about is that the main function of this body today is that it enables the interest group that make up this committee to give an opinion on the European Union's legislative proposals. What do you think if, before we start moving on to other specific aspects of the European Economic and Social Committee, I ask you a question? I will give you 1 minute to answer it. If you know the answer, fantastic, that's a win for you. And if you don't know it, nothing happens because you are just beginning to explore this body. But the time starts now. Time is up. Well, I have to admit that I've been a bit naughty because this question was a bit of a trick. If you are following this session while consulting the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union, you probably picked option A or even option B. Article 301 on the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union states that the number of members of the Economic and Social Committee shall not exceed 350. Article 305 of the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union again says something quite similar. The number of members of the Committee of the Regions shall not exceed 350. This could easily lead you to lean towards option A. However, the fact that both articles indicate the maximum number of members does not mean that this is their actual number. I can in fact confirm to you that the current number of members of both committees is 329. While it is true that the Treaty of Lisbon established that ceiling, after the withdrawal of the United Kingdom with Brexit in 2020, the seats had to be redistributed. The United Kingdom held 24 members in each committee. Not all those seats were reassigned to other member states. The political decision was to reduce the size of the committees to 329 members, both for the European Economic and Social Committee and also for the Committee of the Regions, instead of reaching the maximum allowed of 350 that I already referred. Council decisions 2020/1390 and 2020/1392 set the distribution of seats, which led to a total of 329 members. Now, everything makes sense, right? Well, this rule out option A and option B, but between C and D, which one is the correct one? Well, I must tell you that option D is also incorrect, okay? Although the members are proposed by the member states and appointed by the Council, the internal structure is not organized by member states, but rather by socioeconomic interest groups. And this leaves us with option C as the correct answer. Indeed, the European Economic and Social Committee is made up of 3 specific groups of interest: representatives of employers and employers associations, representatives of workers, national trade unions, confederations, and sectoral federations, and a group known as Diversity Europe, which represents diverse sectors such as small businesses, environmental organizations, and other socioeconomic actors, among others. From within its configuration, the EESC elects a president for a term of 2.5 years, and it has 2 vice presidents who are part of the Bureau and who have specific functions focused on the areas of budget and communication, respectively. In any case, let me take a moment here to make a clarification for you. A few minutes ago, I told you that it was Council Decision 2020/1392 which modified the composition of the EESC. However, I must alert you that this act expired on the 20th of September 2025. A little before that date, on the 16th of September 2025, the Council issued a new decision, the 2025/1911, with the members of the European Economic Social Committee for the period between the 21st of September 2025 to the 20th of September 2030. The number of members has not changed. That is important, okay? But I did not want to miss the opportunity to inform you about this update. All right, we now know its main role and its composition, but what does the Economic and Social Committee actually do? What are its concrete activities? As a consultative body, the Commission, Parliament and Council must carry out a mandatory, okay, this is important, a mandatory consultation before taking a legislative decision in several fields. Which ones are these? Well, I must tell you that there is no a single article that gathers them all together. The specific subject areas appear scattered throughout the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union, in provisions that expressly mention after consulting the Economic and Social Committee. Okay, where can we find an example of this? For example, Article 114 on the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union, when dealing with the approximation of laws which affect the internal market. This happens in many other fields such as social policy and working conditions, the European Social Fund, education, vocational training, youth and sports, culture, public health, economic, social and territorial cohesion, environment, or, for example, trans-European networks, among many others. These are just few examples for you, but you can find the complete list in the policies section of the EESC website. For your knowledge, there are a total of 25 policy areas in which the EESC must be consulted. What happens if it is not consulted? Well, this constitutes a substantial procedural defect. The Court of Justice of the European Union annuls the act in its judgment, which rendered it null and void. Okay, this is important. This principle was established in case 138/79, Roquette et Frères, in 1980, when a regulation was adopted without consulting the European Parliament. Even though at that time, okay, taking into account that we are talking about 1980, at that time was mandatory to consult the European Parliament, which was not part of the legislative process. Although it was not the European Economic and Social Committee, the Court of Justice of the European Union set a fundamental principle. The omission of a mandatory consultation vitiates the procedure and allows annulment. This criterion also applies to the European Economic and Social Committee and of course to the Committee of the Regions. Subsequently, a similar situation has occurred, but very rarely, such as in case C-133/06, European Parliament versus Council 2008, in which the court declared a directive invalid because, in that case, the Committee of the Regions had not been consulted, even though consultation was required by the treaty. It is extraordinarily rare, okay? Take this into account. Practically, I can say non-existent for the institution not to consult the EESC when the treaties provide for it. In fact, reviewing the Court of Justice of the European Union case law, I have not found any case where it has annulled an act specifically for failing to consult the EESC. I have only identified the one I referred to, the Committee of the Regions. The doctrine, in any case, as I said, is applicable, but the direct precedent mainly concerns the Parliament and the Committee of the Regions. This is because it is a procedural requirement, and above all, because the institutions do not fear that the EESC will block the process, since, although it might surprise you, the recommendations of the Economic and Social Committee are not binding, and this is another fact that you need to keep into account. Are they taking into account? Yes, but the institutions are under no obligation to follow the recommendations of the EESC. And what happens if the EESC is consulted but does not deliver an opinion? Could it delay the process as a form of pressure? No, because Article 304 establishes that, and I quote, the European Parliament, the Council or the Commission shall, if it considers necessary, set the committee for the submission of its opinion a time limit which may not be less than 1 month from the date on which the chairman receives notification to this effect. Upon expiry of the time limit, the absence of an opinion shall not prevent further action. So if the European Economic and Social Committee does not issue an opinion, nothing happens. The process can continue regardless. It may also have surprised you when I said that the institutions must consult it on specific policies, but what happens if a legislative recommendation does not fall within those areas? Well, as Article 304 on the Treaty on Functioning of the European Union also points out in its first paragraph, the European Economic and Social Committee may issue an opinion on its own initiative, okay, in cases in which it considers such action appropriate. To give you an idea, and quoting directly again from what is stated on the European Economic and Social Committee website, in total, the EESC issues between 160 and 190 opinions and information reports a year. 70% are referrals by the Council, the European Commission and the European Parliament. 21% for the other side are own initiative opinions and information reports, while for the other side also 9% are exploratory opinions generally requested by the country holding the EU presidency. So at this point, what do you think? Do you have a clear understanding of this committee? Well, I hope so. Throughout this session, we have covered the key elements. Nevertheless, I encourage you to, if you wish, of course, to explore further the work carried out by this body through its website and by following its activity there. It is also worth broadening your knowledge with other official and valuable sources, which are free, such as the Publications Office of the European Union, where you can also follow the European Economic and Social Committee activity. Well then, this brings us to the end of this session of Yepso's Universe. I hope that everything I have shared with you today has been useful and that by now you have a deep understanding on the European Economic and Social Committee. In the next session, we will deal with the Committee of the Regions. Remember that I'm completely open to hearing from you about which topics you will find more useful for us to cover in upcoming sessions. Please share them with me in the comments. And if you don't have any suggestions right now, I will still encourage you to leave a comment telling me what you thought of this session. It's really helpful, not only to know that there is someone on the other side of the screen, but also to help me adapt the content for future videos. One of the most rewarding aspects of this experience of recording these videos for you is seeing the community that we are building together. If you like this one, don't forget to give it a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so yet, and activate the bell. See you in the next session of Yepso's Universe. Have a great week.